You may talk about the knowledge which our farmers' girls have gained from cooking schools and cookbooks where all modern cooks are trained. But I would rather know just how, though vainly I have tried, to prepare like Mother used to, apple sauce and chicken fried. Our farmers' girls know how to fix their dainty dishes rare. But friend, just let me tell you what, nothing can compare to what my mother used to fix, and for which I've often cried when I was but a little tot. Apple sauce and chicken fried. Chicken a la Francaise and also fricassee, served with some newfangled sauce, is plenty good for me. Till I get to thinking about that home where once I used to bide and where I used to eat. Oh my! Apple sauce and chicken fried. Our good, yet jolly pastor, on his weekly circuit rides with us once each week, gave grateful thanks for apple sauce and chicken fried. It seems like I can smell it and even taste it too and see it with my natural eye, although it can't be true. And suddenly I am standing at my mother's side, pulling on her skirt and asking for applesauce and chicken fried. That poem transports me back in time. I am immediately in the kitchen of the home where I grew up, at my mother's knee, surrounded by the wondrous sense of her cooking, wrapped in her love and the love of my family. It reminds me of the great good blessing of having been born and raised not a short stretch from here in Upper Chloe Creek. To those of you who I may not have had the pleasure of meeting yet, my name is Effie Waller-Smith. My family gave name to the beautiful strip of land upon which our farm lays, Waller Holler. My mother, Sibby Ratliff, and my father, Frank Waller, were both freed enslaved persons. They took the surnames of the families who, in the sorry vernacular of the time, owned them. My mother and grandmother were purchased by General Ratliff of Pikeville. He was a Confederate, like most people in Kentucky at the time, but he felt for the plight of enslaved black people and tried to keep as much of my mother's family together as he could afford. My father was freed from his servitude at Cedar Point Plantation in Virginia, owned by the Waller family, at which point he made his way to Kentucky, where he and my mother met, fell in love, and married in 1870. My father had learned the trades of wharf master and blacksmith and earned income as both upon his arrival in Pikeville. Though East Kentucky, after the War of the States, was not exactly as it is today, the town had changed enough to see a free man as just that, a man who deserved pay for the sweat of his brow, just like any other man. A frugal and industrious man, my daddy saved enough money to buy not only 100 acres, 2 cows, and seed, which began our family's farm, but 5 more parcels of land within the county and 2 more beyond its borders. Unlike many places in our newly reconciled nation, Upper Chloe Creek was a remarkable place where black and white citizens lived as neighbors. And like all who lived among the mountains, the food at our table came from the soil beneath our feet and the sweat on our brow. My brother Alfred come along in 1874, followed a year later by Rosa, and I was born January 6, 1879. home was one of love, honest labor, and above all, learning. Mother and Daddy understood that for black men and women to be prosperous in this new world, our education was paramount to our success. We three each attended the District A Colored School in Pikeville. That was 4 miles from our door. That is a long walk through these mountains. But that is where I fell in love with them. And they became a whole other school for me. My native mountains. I love my native mountains. The dear old Cumberlands, rock-ribbed and everlasting. How great they are and grand. I love each skyward-reaching peak, each glassy glade and dale, each moss and fern-clad precipice, each lovely flower-decked vale. I love each vine-hung rocky glen. I love each dark ravine, though there may hide the catamount and the wild dog sly and mean. I love my mountains' forests, so varied and beautiful. I love each spring and waterfall, so pure and wonderful. I love her richly plumaged birds, the pheasant and the jay, the merry scarlet tanager, the woodpeck, bright and gay. How oft amongst these mountains has a silvery music clear from the lark's throat cheered the traveler, the honest mountaineer. But more in these old mountains, with which wonder I revere. With true devotion do I love the people who live here. So here's with love sincere and dear for her sons of brawn and worth, and her daughters, pure and lovely, the fairest tops on earth. After I finished my common schooling, I followed my sister Rosa to Frankfort, where you could find the Kentucky Normal School for Colored Persons, which would come to be known as Kentucky State University. Frankfort was a far cry from my homestead in the mountains. Being a young woman in a big city, for the first time like that, suddenly my knowledge of tree and creek and flower didn't serve me in such good stead. But I had many an impressive role model in the young women I met who were living their lives and carving a path for themselves. I was so impressed. I just had to write about them. Oh, the bachelor girl. She's no old maid. She's not afraid to let you know she's her own boss. She's easy pleased. She's not diseased. She is not nervous, is not cross. She's no desire, whatever for, misses to precede her name. The blessedness of singleness she all her life will proudly claim. She does not sit around and knit on baby caps and mittens. She does not play her time away with puggy dogs and kittens. And if a mouse about the house she sees, she will not scream of a handsome beau and bill of dough. Bachelor girl does never dream. She reads history, biography, tales of adventure far and near on sea and land, but love stories and poetry rarely interest her. She's lots of wit and uses it. A horse sense, too, she has a store. The latest news she always knows. She reads the daily papers o'er of politics and all the tricks and schemes politicians use. She knows full well, and she can tell with eloquence of them her views. An athlete that's hard to beat, the bachelor girl surely is. She makes good aims when playing games and always strictly minds her biz. Amid the hustle and the bustle of this life, she goes alone. If you should see her out, she seldom has a chaperone. But if you catch her out at night, she has a 32, and she can shoot, you bet your boots, if necessity demands her to. But she is kind, and you will find her always spreading sunshine bright amongst the poor, and she is sure to advocate for the right on her mater and her pater. For support she does not lean. She talks and writes of women's rights in language forceful and clean. She does not shirk. She does her work amid life's fast hustling world. So come what may, she's here to stay. The self-supporting bachelor girl. After I graduated from college, I returned to my Cumberlands. In fact, I returned to District A colored school, but this time as a teacher. And when the weather would cooperate, I'd bring my students out into my Appalachian mountains so nature could be their teacher too. Thus began my first foray into the breaks. Oh, that magnificent bounty, a river and valley cut right into the living mountains of East Kentucky. Its majesty imprinted itself upon my soul and flowed forth from my pen onto the pages of my journal. My family and friends were remarkably encouraging of my poetry. Some prominent citizens were so taken by it, they saw fit to facilitate having them printed in the local newspaper. I don't want to sound immodest, but they continued to gain public favor. I became friends with one such estimable citizen, a Miss Mary Elliott Flannery. She was so kind and wonderful, forward-thinking, and more about the betterment of all people, whether they be black, white, man, or woman. She graciously took me under her wing, and with her connections, I became the first black woman published to Harper's. Miss Flannery soon got in mind to begin collecting my works into a published volume titled Songs of the Monks. She became not only my advocate, but my patron, taking it as her duty to not only raise the funds, including helping finance the publication, but she personally wrote the introduction to my first volume. Now, writing the preface to a tome you helped finance seems a simple task and a decision a little consequence, but it took considerable bravery for a woman imbued with Southern prejudice, quote, whose own near family, the Elliots of East Kentucky, fought to keep the Negro in subjugation, unquote, to say, time and development of the colored race will surely appeal to the reasons of anti-abolitionists and cause them to reflect that perhaps, after all, they may have been in error. Unquote. Her words then turned to praise of my work, which I do blush to repeat, that, quote, Miss Waller's poetry, as all who read it will observe, is possessed of much pathos and beauty, having an originality all its own. Who knows that, like Paul Laurence Dunbar, she may not one day surprise and delight her own race and cause white critics to marvel at her genius. In Miss Waller's verse is that simply beautiful lyrical quality which, like Keats and Burns, charm and win all heart. Unquote. I would go on to publish 2 more volumes of poetry, Rhymes of the Cumberlands and Rosemary and Pansies. I would go on to marry 2 more men, one of whom I shouldn't have looked at twice. The second of which was my childhood love, taken too soon. I'd go on to teach in several more schools, some as close as Kentucky, some as far as Tennessee, but I would return to my Cumberlands to drink one last draught of the mountains and streams. Shortly after the publication of my 3rd work, life took me to the Midwest, to Wisconsin, where I would raise a child left to me in my care by an old friend. I had a whole separate life there. But no more poetry. Oh, I left that in the big Sandy of my home. Old Sandy. The sun-bathed hills were beautiful. The day was bright and fair. The wind was blowing fresh and cool. The atmosphere was rare. When merry and light-hearted, on a jackboat painted red, seeking some far-off woodland place, we up the Sandy sped. Far up the rippling winding stream, we found a pleasant spot. 'Twas beautiful in the extreme, hid from the sunbeams hot. The branches of the sycamore, with branches spreading wide, made a lovely archway over the river on both sides. We pushed our boat toward the shore and carefully tied her to a hanging branch of sycamore which near the water grew. Along the shady sandy bank, amid the willows tall and rank, we left our deep feet's print. On a large rock, smooth and bare, we sat a while and ate a most delicious dinner there, which we'll not soon forget. When shadows of the evening showed among the mountain green, our painted boat we gently rowed down the rippling stream. With happy minds we homeward went, thinking we'd not soon forget the pleasant day that we had spent on dear old Sandy River.